Hey, welcome back, AP Government. Hopefully, you're doing well. This is going to be the start of our very last unit that we're going to cover in AP Government. So, congratulations, you've made it to the end here. We are going to look at civil liberties and civil rights, which is one of my favorite, units to cover because it really kind of connects a lot of what we've been talking about with court cases. And a lot of times, the course focuses on the fights that happen between the different institutions, the different branches with court cases and whatnot. So, speaking of being my favorite time of the year, as you can see here, we are celebrating like crazy around here with our Christmas celebrations and whatnot. So, anyway, just getting festive and in the mood for winter and Christmas are on the horizon here. So, in this video, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the intro to civil liberties and civil rights, what the difference is between them, and then we'll kind of show you the constitutional justification for each of these and where they're located within the Constitution. Okay. We're going to try to cover all this today. We're going to cover the civil liberties and civil rights. We're going to cover this idea of a selective incorporation, one of my favorite concepts to teach. I usually do a wrap for you all. I won't do a wrap right now, but I'll probably record it later when I'm feeling a little bit stronger, and you can hear Mr. Matthews' rap, his Get Low versus New York rap, and we'll put that out there for the whole web to see. And then we'll talk about First Amendment rights today, and then a little bit of the nationalization. Okay, let's go here first. Talking about civil liberties. Civil liberties are protections against the government. Civil liberties are protections that basically give us freedom from the government, if you will. The idea that the government cannot impose upon these, that's civil liberties. They're mainly outlined in your Bill of Rights and your First Amendment. And again, you have your First Amendment protections, and then you have protections that are given more or less to give you due process. So there's two categories. There's like your First Amendment protections, freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, petition. And then you also have the due process ones. And just to let you know, your due process rights are all the rights that you're given once you're accused of a crime. Right? Your right to have a fair trial, right to be given a lawyer, right to not have a crazy fine imposed upon you, or any kind of like cruel and unusual punishment. Those are all what we consider to be your civil liberties, and they're laid out in your Bill of Rights. Okay? Your civil rights, well, these are not really laid out in any government document, or they're not in the Constitution at least. Okay? Not in the Bill of Rights, at least. I mean, so the civil rights are going to be more implied, if you will, where these are more expressed. Your civil rights are provided to you by the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Okay. And this is trying to make sure that there's no discrimination that takes place, that there is protections that are guaranteed to people to not be treated in any kind of prejudicial way. So it's to try to make sure that the constitutional guarantees are a reality for all people, right? So we're going to try to eliminate discrimination. This is more of a positive act of government, and that the government needs to provide you civil rights. Civil liberties, they can't touch. That makes sense to you. Okay. A civil rights violation means the government has to step up and provide something for you to make sure that you are treated equally. Again, civil liberties, they can't infringe upon because of the Bill of Rights. So let's talk about it a little bit more. Your civil liberties are freedoms from the government. Here they all are. These are just your first classification of them, your first area, the First Amendment. Freedom of religion, speech, press, right to assemble, right to petition. I didn't put petition on there, but that one's in there as well. Other civil liberties are going to be mentioned in the Bill of Rights. And again, the due process, your due process. If I don't think we had a chance to sing our Bill of Rights song, but your Fifth Amendment is your right to due process. If you remember, maybe way back, I sang that song talking about your Bill of Rights in that one. And that's a really important one because those are all the rights. Like if you are ever accused of a crime, and you cannot ever be put on the trial to incriminate yourself, right? Self-incrimination, you can say, I plead the Fifth, right? The Fifth Amendment protects your rights from self-incrimination. And that's all part of your due process rights. But there's many, many parts of your due process rights that says you are given certain freedoms, certain protections once you're accused of a crime. Okay, so keep that in mind as we're about to talk about this next concept called selective incorporation. Okay, here is, though, real quickly, though, your civil rights, right? So your civil rights are going to be provided by the 14th Amendment. And let me show you, there are two key clauses in the 14th Amendment that I want you to sit on for a second, okay? The first one is, we'll go to the very last one here. It says, nor deny to any person within his jurisdiction the equal protection. That clause right there, the equal protection clause, is what provides for your civil liberty, or civil rights, excuse me. This is the idea that states cannot treat you differently. They cannot discriminate against you. Again, civil rights are going to be these things that are largely going to tell the states you have to treat citizens equally. Okay? We have had some legislation passed, like the Civil Rights Act in 1964, right, that has obviously taken power away from the states. But largely, we know that the 10th Amendment gives states power, right? All powers not given to the federal government are reserved to the states. The 14th Amendment, though, this restricts states' power. It's going to now eliminate what the states could do. It basically says they now have to abide by these new laws, and they have to make sure that they protect the rights of citizens, right? And this is where we can get another important clause. It also has the due process clause, right? And the idea that states are not allowed to deprive due process. So essentially what's happened is this. Over time, the Bill of Rights was originally meant for the federal government, right? And then over here, the states, they didn't really have the Bill of Rights. They had like their own constitution, they had their own provisions. But because of this, excuse me, amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the due process clause, okay, now some of these Bill of Rights have been extended over to the states. In fact, most of them have been sent over. This process is called selective incorporation. It's a really important term that we got to sit on and we got to know, because this is the idea that the Bill of Rights have been incorporated to the states one at a time. It's selectively. Okay? But it's because the Bill of Rights has the Fifth Amendment due process clause. The 14th Amendment then is going to extend that to the states. Again, originally the Bill of Rights were only for the federal government. But what's happened over time is that this has now been opened up. And now not only does the federal government have to read you your rights, so do the states. Miranda versus Arizona. Not only does the federal government have to give you a fair search and seizure, like the FBI if they want to search you, so do the state police. And that court case we're going to talk about, it's called Mapp versus Ohio. So this process of incorporating the Bill of Rights to the states one at a time on a case-by-case situation is called selective incorporation, and it's a really, really big concept that we're going to keep developing and talking about. Okay, so again, we have, as a result of the 14th Amendment, the Bill of Rights have been applied to the states. And again, the due process is just the way the government must treat you. So that's been extended over to the states. Just again, the states love the 10th Amendment, right? They don't like the 14th Amendment because the 14th Amendment restricts them and now puts those same kind of regulations. If I go back here, remember the Bill of Rights, like these are like, you can't do this, federal government, right? That's kind of what the Bill of Rights are, restrictions on the federal government. So now, one at a time, it's like cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. It's also putting those same limits onto the states one at a time. Okay. So the court case that I really like to talk about, and I do a little rap on this one, is Gitlow versus New York. And again, you know the song Little John, or Lil John, I guess. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Hey, you know that one when we talk about, to the window, to the wall, right? All right, so I will rap, and I have a good rap for this one. This is the court case that first brought about selective incorporation. Okay. So it's a big court case and it's fun to talk about. Gitlow's the one that's going to ultimately open up this window and open up this connection, if you will, where the Bill of Rights pertain to the states. Here's my rap. I will sing that for you another time. Um, and I'll let you look at it there if you want to, though. But it's good. It goes, from the federal government to the states, to the states, to the states. Some of these rights apply. The states just can't deny. So anyway, I will sing that to y'all either in person or I'll record myself doing that. It's a fun one with some music behind me. But here's the process of incorporation, real quickly. So the process we could see is obviously the first big one is Gitlow versus New York. That's the first one that applied the Bill of Rights to the states, and it's a key one. Okay. The next one we can look at is going to be the Establishment Clause. We haven't talked a lot about the Establishment Clause. I'll get into that next, but the Establishment Clause is going to be that kind of like wall of separation between the church and the state, right? It's that provision that says the church and the state have to be remain separate and independent of each other. In 1961, you have an unreasonable search. This is Mapp versus Ohio. This is a really fascinating case in which the police were looking for a bombing suspect in Ohio. So they went to this, excuse me, lady's home, Dalry Mapp, who they know has kind of like, think of it like a bed and breakfast back in the day, but it wasn't really a bed and breakfast. It was kind of like a halfway house. People would come in and stay, and they would move in and move out, and she would kind of, have this kind of like informal hotel, if you will. So they went to her home, and they were basically like, we want to look for this guy. And she's like, do you have a search warrant? And they were like, no. And so she's like, well, I'm not letting you in my house. Well, basically, they came back like 30 minutes later. They brandished a piece of paper saying it was a search warrant, but they never showed it to her. When she tried to stop them from coming into her house, they arrested her. And then they found some stuff under a suitcase in a bedroom. They found pornography. And again, in the 1960s, this was illegal to have, so they charged her with this. And so this gets brought up, and she says, you can't charge me with that. That was found illegally. And ultimately, the Supreme Court's going to agree with her in Mapp versus Ohio. They're going to say that, yes, any kind of evidence found illegally has to be removed. You can't use that against someone. And that this is where you now have those reasonable expectations for a reasonable search at both the federal level and the state level for property. So I'll talk more about that one because that's a really important one with the Fourth Amendment, like which evidence can be admitted in court and which ones had to basically be removed because it was gained illegally. The Sixth Amendment, this is one of your key court cases, by the way. This is Gideon versus Wainwright. This is the one that has a right to counsel. Self-incrimination. This is Miranda versus Arizona. This is your Miranda rights, which is why in your Miranda rights, it says in there, you have the right to an attorney. That's because 3 years later, or 3 years earlier, Gideon versus Wainwright was decided that basically says that you have a right to an attorney. So when Miranda case came out, they're going to include that part in the Miranda rights. Okay. In 2008, you get the right to bear arms. And again, in 2010, McDonald versus Chicago, this now extends that to the states. The states cannot put an outright ban on your ability to own a handgun. They can make it really difficult. They could put fines, they could put implications, they could put background checks, they could put all sorts of things, but they can't put an outright ban on your ability. Okay, and there's a whole lot more of cases on this one that we could talk about, like Roe v. Wade's another one of your cases. That deals with kind of the due process. That's your Fourth Amendment carrying over to the states. And again, similar, the state can't just put an outright ban on a woman's right to have an abortion. Not within the first trimester, at least, right? That's what the Supreme Court said in Roe v. Wade, that there has to be that window of opportunity or window of time, if you will, for a woman to make that decision. And then the state can impose limitations after the first 12 weeks. Okay, provisions not covered under the whole selective incorporation. Quartering troops, no one really cares about that one. Grand jury, that doesn't really apply for the states because it's not the same. You don't have grand juries at the state level. And then trial by jury in civil cases, again, not so much at the state level. But this is the process called selective incorporation, again, carrying the Bill of Rights over to the states. Okay. All right. I'm going to do one quick practice question with you all, then we'll end this video for the day. Um, it says many scholars and observers have argued that the ratification of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution has become the single most important act in all of U.S. politics. Identify which provision in the 14th Amendment was applied in each of the following court cases, and basically tell me like what happened. So these are all. You got Brown versus Board of Education, Baker versus Carr, and then the Regents of University, California versus Bakke. We haven't talked about that one yet, but we will. But these are all civil rights cases, so that's going to be the Equal Protection Clause, right? And so you could just talk about that and then give me an idea for the case you select, right? So maybe you talk about Brown versus Board of Education and what that did. That overturned Plessy, and that brought about public school integration, right? Integration in public school. Letter B, then identify the provision of the 14th Amendment that was applied here, and then you got to be able to explain the significance. So again, this is not the Equal Protection Clause. This one would be the Due Process Clause, right? And the due process is what's going to carry that Bill of Rights over to the states. And you could talk about Gideon versus Wainwright if you want to, right? The right to have a lawyer. Matt versus Ohio, again, the right to basically have a reasonable search and seizure and whatnot. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop there for this video. I hope that was a good introduction to civil liberties, civil rights. Got a lot more to cover on this, but this is a good kind of intro to get you somewhat understanding the difference between the two. We'll make some more here very soon. Look forward to seeing you guys there. Take care, guys. We'll see you. Bye.